burying comrades like Dwight Chickering somewhere near the house. But yeah, it's a shame to me that they didn't leave more of a record. Right. Yeah, there are some mysteries with this property. Judge Parker's papers are at the Chicago Historical Society. And years ago when the university first acquired it, we're like, hey, this is great. But when you go to look through those papers, like there's a map of this property in the 1840s which would have told us like this is where the slave cabins are. Somebody stole the map.
Oh.
So may they burn in hell.
There are a lot of outbuildings that they have.
Yeah.
It's with the Epstein.
Yeah, it's with the Epstein file. So, on that morning of the 20th, Lieutenant Colonel Montague received a message from Wright. I want you to prepare your pickets to cross. So what Montague does is he doesn't want to cross them in a big front. He wants to actually consolidate those three companies as if they are one unit of about 120, 130 men. And he is going to cross them roughly right here. So he wants to use Parker's Island, which is through the trees there. So what we're looking at is an island. The Confederate line would be on the other side. So the idea is to cross your men down these banks, right? And soldiers who were retreating on the 18th and soldiers who are moving across on the 20th talk about how difficult this is. You know, even when somebody's not shooting at you, I mean, I wouldn't want to go down there right now. But to get through those banks, wade through the river, and then get to Parker's Island. Now, one of the things that Montague's men have to be careful of is not only if there are Confederates on the island or the other side, but they also have to be very careful. We're not going to go there today, but about another 900,000 yards north of us is a very, very deep part of the Shenandoah River called Parker's Hole. And so Parker's Hole, whether there is a drought or not, is always deep. We actually mapped the river in that area about 4 or 5 years ago, and it was, depending on what part of the river, it was 15 to 25 feet deep. And so I'm sure there's a mathematical formula you figure out the buildup of silt over the time, but it is a deep part of the river. Now, Montague's men would have been aware of that because there are Union soldiers on the night of the 18th who were retreating who actually fell and drowned in Parker's Hole. Now, what Montague doesn't know is once he forms his men up here and crosses, what's going to meet him. So he is actually going to form his men up. He rides on horseback. So he kind of sees this in his mind as a grand moment. Leads his men, gets to Parker's Island, looks across, and he's like, I don't see any Confederates there. I still see the remnants of barricades. So his men, he orders them to charge across in this big, loud, gallant charge. And they get there and they rush up 75 yards to the crest and there's no one there. This is what a soldier in the 37th Massachusetts wrote about this. Lieutenant Colonel Montague was on horseback. Up the little bluff they rushed, expecting each moment the flash of hostile rifles in their faces, but no enemy was visible. It was a bloodless victory, but nonetheless it was to those engaged a most thrilling episode. Okay, so as they get to that other side and they realize that there is no immediate threat from the Confederates, two things happen. Horatio Wright sends part of the 6th Corps to move toward Berryville to see exactly how far have the Confederates gone. They don't even move all the way to Berryville. They maybe move 2 or 3 miles. They're like, we don't see anybody. And Horatio Wright interprets that Jubal Early's done, he's retreating, he's going back to Petersburg. Don't know why he would think that, but that's what he thinks. That's what he writes to the War Department in Washington. The other thing that Horatio Wright is concerned with is scouring the battlefield for any wounded Union soldiers who might have been left. And they will find some, a handful. But when those Union soldiers cross to the other side, what they see, it shocks them. Because it's not just the carnage of battle, it's how the Union dead have been treated. And I will say, what I'm about to describe to you is not abnormal for the aftermath of battle. But there are some guys who cross, who maybe haven't had as much combat experience as others. They are seeing this for the first time. So the Confederate dead were buried in normal graves, buried appropriately. The Union dead were half buried. So there are accounts of, arms and legs and feet sticking out of the ground, very, very shallow graves. Both sides did this throughout the war. I would argue, and other historians have argued this, like Drew Gilpin Faust wrote a great book, This Republic of Suffering, that it was done to psychologically torment the enemy. Like if you see your soldiers buried like this, it's going to have an impact on your psyche negatively. There are other accounts of Union soldiers who haven't been buried at all, but their bodies stripped naked of their uniforms and their bodies physically abused by the Confederates. One of those soldiers who was abused is this guy right here, Private Samuel Hayes of the 116th Ohio. And we know this because in the aftermath of the battle, once the Army crosses on the 20th, his really good friend, Lieutenant William Byron Henry, is going over the battlefield, and he comes across Private Hayes' body. Lieutenant Henry wrote a letter to his sister back in Ohio and said how this was a transformative moment for him. Because up until this point in time, he said, I am fighting the war to preserve the Union and to destroy slavery. He said, but now we're going to add something else to the list. It is revenge. And he said, I cannot wait, and he wrote, and I'm quoting now, to retaliate upon the live carcasses of rebels. This is also not an unusual feeling for soldiers on either side. You have your best friend, someone you love so dearly, has been abused like this. Yeah, I think the vengeful part would come out of me as well. And I think out of most of us. Now, as soldiers were going off to the other side that morning and into the early afternoon, the weather became treacherous. There's an account of a soldier in the 8th Vermont said that there was a tornado that actually, cropped up somewhere on the battlefield, and that sent troops scattering. There was a surgeon from the 121st New York said that the storm was a quote-unquote real ripper, whatever that means. All right. There was a Union soldier struck by lightning that day on the battlefield. So just a reminder that you don't only have to worry about just the enemy shooting at you. Mother Nature gets angry sometimes and will take you out as well. Now, as soldiers were going back over the battlefield that day, they were not only looking for wounded, but looking for dead comrades they knew that they had left behind. And maybe they could just reclaim their bodies or give them a proper burial. And so I want to end with this story. So on the night of July the 18th, Sergeant David Terry of the 123rd Ohio had been shot in the chest. 4 of his comrades tried to get him from the battlefield to this side of the river. They got as far as Parker's Island, and Sergeant Terry was in such pain and agony. He told his comrades, he said, I am slowing you down. I am putting your lives in danger. Just leave me here to die. And so at some point between the night of July the 18th and the late morning of the 20th, when the Army recrosses back over, Sergeant Terry died. As his comrades were searching his body for his personal effects, letters, diary, watch, those types of things, they couldn't find them, and they were perplexed by this. They thought, well, this is bizarre. Well, they were searching around and they found out that Sergeant Terry knew he was going to die. And his greatest concern, they imagined, was his personal possessions falling into the hands of the enemy. So it just so happened that there was a log that had fallen down. He crawled over to that log and buried them underneath it. And he thought, maybe my comrades will find my body. If not, the earth can reclaim them. So they found those things. They packaged them up. Lieutenant John Chamberlain of the 123rd clipped a lock of his hair, packaged it all up, and put it with a letter to his wife, Mary Ann Terry. When he was writing this letter, it was pretty typical. Your husband was a gallant man. He died in service of his country. The regiment loved him. And you can see this moment in this letter that Chamberlain writes, where he kind of pauses and thinks about all the expressions of sympathy he is offering in the letter. When we think about this, we've all lost someone we love, and we write, you know, in a card, here's a sympathy card, but sometimes we think, like, what does it actually mean? And Chamberlain thought to himself, and he writes this in the letter, but human sympathy avails little. And so he knew that for the widow Mary Ann Terry and for the two children he leaves behind, Joseph and Lycurgus, that they're going to be sad, yes, but there's also going to be financial concerns. Who's going to care for the family farm now? And so Mary Ann Terry did what every single Union widow did during the war. She applied for a widow's pension. That process generally took about 3 months, ended up receiving it, and she ended up getting $12 from the federal government. $8 for her and $2 for each additional child. She received that pension until her death in the early 1900s. As the last act of his comrades, Lieutenant Chamberlain ordered that Terry's body be wrapped in a blanket and be buried on Parker's Island. If floodwaters haven't taken it away, I would still dare to say that his remains are buried on that island. To me, war in and of itself is tragic and sad, but this is extremely sad. Because there is no grave for Mary Ann Terry to come with her children to pay respects, to have closure. There's nowhere to lay flowers, there's nowhere to offer up a prayer. And if you think about what we've looked at, you know, throughout the past, you know, hour and a half this morning, you have come to learn a bit about the battle, but I feel like, and my goal was that you learn more about the people who fought at the battle. And, you know, I am not delusional. The Battle of Cool Spring is not. I think Charles Dana is right. The remarks I made at the outset. This battle achieved nothing strategically or tactically, and that's true. But battles' importances are not always relegated to what happens strategically or tactically or politically. Because for all of these guys that I'm talking about, Bevins, Whitaker, Polk, Murray, Terry, and all these other individuals, Private Trable, all of these individuals, for them, this was a life-altering moment. This is a tragic moment. And to me, this is why battlefields are important. They're not only places to study the war, but they offer tangible connections to the past. They offer tangible connections to these stories, and they teach us as a people, right, what happens when a nation becomes divided to an unbridgeable point. People die. And I want to close our program this morning with this. So in the late part of the 1960s, a historian, W.J. Tansey, wrote a poem, kind of an epic poem about the Civil War. And one of the things that really resonates with me about this piece of literature is his emphasis on the importance of the battlefield, not as a place to play general and second guess what commanders do, which is what historians like to do all the time, but really to help people make that tangible connection with all of these stories. And this is what he wrote, and I'll close with this. Wars and battles, in historical retrospect, are usually described in terms of grand strategy, local tactics, and the immortality of generals. Common soldiers are kneaded into a fearless dough of conflict and consigned to oblivion. But the battlefield offers an opportunity to explore the story of ordinary soldiers, the days, the nights, the miles, and the comradeship, and how they culminate in a vast battle. A battlefield allows you to go with them and their venerable regiments for a while and test their days in determination and spare, and to stand where they stood and to come to know their suffering and pain. And so not that I want you all to suffer and be in pain. I hope that this program today, something a little bit different than what we've done in years past, kind of helps you connect with that and understand that. That these places, yes, we oftentimes look at them like this as a map. Those are 13,000 guys on that map. Those are 13,000 stories with tens of more thousands of stories behind them with the family and friends and comrades they leave behind. So with that, I want to thank you all for coming out, for sweating with me. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Where's Parker's Hole in relation to these?
So Parker's Hole, if you walk this path north, you'll see a rise of ground that goes up. It's actually tour stop number 5 on the walking tour. And you look down and it's down there. You can't miss it. You can hear it. before you can see it, because the waters just swirl around. And it's
The men who drowned, are they still there, or did they get them out?
great question. So we have identified 5 soldiers who specific cause of death at the battle is drowning in Parker's Hole. My sense is they are still there, because we have accounts from fishermen or fisher people in the early 1900s who are fishing in Parker's Hole, and they're bringing up like metal uniform parts. So belt buckles and bayonets and those types of things. So my sense is that they're still there. And there are, you know, individuals who are going to come back after the war. There's one soldier from the 18th Connecticut, Private Samuel Smith, who was killed at the battle. His brother, who fights here, will actually come back, find his brother's remains, bring him back home to Connecticut. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, there were burials around the house. You know, there are some guys from the 34th Massachusetts, like Private Dwight Chickering was supposedly buried in a garden near the retreat. My suspicion is those guys were moved to unmarked graves in the National Cemetery. But they're, again, I would bet, you know, Parker's Island, there's Sergeant Terry, maybe even a few others out there. Any other questions? All right, I want to thank you all very much. Can't do much about the weather, but we survived. So I'll be back in the lodge if anyone is wanting to cool down. Thank you. To buy books, make donations, any of that kind of stuff. Use the restroom. We're happy to do it. So thank you all very much.